Welcome to the Earthworks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons, and this is the Earthworks podcast. And we are very fortunate to have back with us, I think you were with us in April of last year, Tyler, Mr. Tyler Bloom, the president of Tyler Bloom Consulting. And Tyler, as most people probably now know, certainly in the Northeast and on the East Coast, is one of the predominant labor experts in our industry. And this is a topic I think is on everybody's mind these days. It is absolutely the first question I get as I walk into anybody's office is, hey, Joel, do you know anybody, or, can you find me an assistant, or, is there anybody out there? And unfortunately, my answer is often no. I just, it's the toughest thing. So Tyler, thanks for coming back. I think we got to make this a yearly thing, because this is such a big topic. And, it hasn't gotten any better. I mean, it doesn't seem like we're getting really far down this road of making this a lot better. And it's, the whole COVID experience has been nothing but strange to me. I've lost 3 years of my life. I don't know where it went. And in that process, we've lost all of our employees. Supply chain is broken. It's hard to get bottles, boxes, trucks, plastic, raw materials, nitrogen, and of course, employees. And you go around to these golf courses and they're doing phenomenal jobs. And I think, the guys that I'm talking to, everybody says they're about 40% down in labor. So is it getting any better? I mean, are we seeing any light at the end of the tunnel here?
I think as a generalization, probably not. Like from my observation, not really. If anything, I think superintendents have in clubs, one difference from a year ago, you talked about that. What's the difference from a year ago is I think clubs are a little bit more receptive to doing things different, whether it's benefits, time off, trying to kind of adjust to the workforce as best as they can while still, catering to a golfer expectations, which really haven't changed. They've probably gotten harder. The demand's gotten harder, right? But I think it's really regionalized and site specific, right? We could be working with a club 10 to 15 miles from a neighboring club with similar budgets, similar demographics, and two totally different labor situations. So It's been pretty fascinating, to try to come up with some trends or look at trends and say, well, I don't really know if I can take that, other than the consensus is everybody's challenged in some fashion, whether that's the mid-level management level or the entry level, and all there in between as well.
Yeah, it's really strange. I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time, as everybody knows, and I've never seen anything like this. Let me, for purposes of folks that may not have seen us talk last time, let's go backwards a little bit and talk a little bit about you. Give me a quick rundown of your background. You've got grass growing experience, and then let's talk in some details to what it is Tyler Bloom Consulting is. But you started cutting grass a long time ago, didn't you?
Yeah, geez, 2003.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
It was my first summer at Berwick Golf Club, just mowing greens, breaking bunkers, getting in trouble.
Yeah,
certainly
a lot happening like that in Berwick, I understand. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. And then, went to Penn State and had a 4-year degree. Had some internship experiences at Marion, Southern Hills, Muirfield Village. Postgraduate, I worked at Oakmont Country Club from 2009 to late 2011.
Pretty crappy places you've been at, I see.
Absolute dog tracks, right?
Yeah, really. Geez, quite the resume.
Pedigree and all that stuff. But no, I was very fortunate to work at some pretty historical places and really, really good people. So it's funny, you look back, hindsight's always 2020, but I probably took for granted those opportunities more so than now, having a little bit more, I don't know if you want to call it wisdom, but just age.
Age and wisdom the same.
Yes. Yeah, very fortunate. So, and then I was a superintendent at a club in Baltimore called Sparrows Point Country Club, which is, probably like the majority of clubs in the country, just, middle of the road, private facility, great bones of the property, great membership, very blue collar.
Yeah.
And was there for 6 years before I jumped right into this venture back in June of 2020. So, we're coming up, literally June 13th was my first day full time. So we're just about 2 years.
So you jumped into this thing right as COVID was exploding, no pun
Yeah.
intended.
Yeah.
And explain to everybody, just so those that haven't seen this before know exactly what it is that you're doing now. I mean, you've got a unique twist on the business that you're focused on. But go ahead and give us an idea as to what you're really doing.
Well, I'll tell you what it started as was more of a workforce development, and it was really trying to help club superintendents connect in their communities with different, let's call it untraditional labor pools. Could be veterans, could be high schools, community colleges, people with disabilities. And then over the course of 2 years, it is transformed, evolved into directly search and placement is our primary business model.
Really out of
And
necessity, right? I mean, you got such requests from everybody because it's so hard to find anybody.
yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, I wasn't a born recruiter. I wasn't trained in HR, coming up. It was a turf manager. And, fortunately, I did take some classes, did get some continued education to, kind of specialize in this, I guess. And, I would tell you it started with entry level type positions. Last
Yeah.
year, I kind of look back and see like the jobs that I was managing at the time were more entry level. And then I was, to be honest, I was a bit nervous on taking on assistant jobs because of the general consensus is there's no people there in those kind of positions. And it was just through encouragement from clients to say, this is what we need. Like, we understand that we're not going to get 10 or 15 people. We need one. Like,
Yeah.
we need two candidates. We're not getting anything. And, let's call it from August of 2021 to this point, I think we've redirected the business to that's where our focus is on assistant management level, executive level equipment manager searches, really specifically for the turf industry. We'd done some stuff in culinary and golf shop operations, but I kind of realized like there's enough business and there's enough demand, and the people that we're best positioned to serve are superintendents and turf industry professionals.
Are you still doing the workforce development work you started this with? I mean, you still going into those communities and, and veterans groups and places like that to find people to help our industry out?
For sure. It's so there's a couple different ways we do this. From an association level, I work with New York State Turf Association. We created 3 registered apprenticeships, and that whole focus is on connecting with those kind of groups we talked about. I have similar relationships with the Philly Association and the Mid-Atlantic Association. And we're at the really kind of entry level stages of that process. But the idea was, most clubs aren't going to pay me and see the value of a long-term investment. They want what's right in front of them, and they need direct search and placement.
Yeah. Yeah.
So working with the associations, it's sort of, okay, let's crowdsource this kind of concept for the greater good of all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a long-term play, but it's a necessity in this market just to make people aware. Because again, through my own experience, as a super, and even now, most people they're just not aware that the golf industry and the career pathways exist like they do.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because our agronomist out west, Kevin Hicks, he was actually doing a group with one of the youth groups that trying to encourage people in the golf. Although that doesn't seem like we're having a problem getting golfers these days. We're just having a problem getting people to work. Let's talk about, I think last time you were here, and you were here on April 14th of 2021, and I think you had just started or just gotten the opportunity to work with the New York State Association. Talk to me about that. I mean, what role do you take in these associations? I mean, you're doing more than you're doing a lot of stuff for them. So walk me through what that means to you as your relationship with some of these associations.
Yeah, well, I will tell you first off, it's not as a recruiter. Like
I wouldn't think so. Yeah,
it's a separate relationship, right? So if a club wants the direct search and placement, they're going to work with Tyler Bloom Consulting purely on that sort of relationship. So I like to say that right out the gate, because it can get muddy, if people think, oh, he's recruiting for my business, and if I'm not, what's Tyler Bloom doing for me, right? So the way I kind of manage this, or I feel my role is I'm a central coordinator on behalf of those employers of those associations. And I connect them to, like I said, the Department of Labor, could be veterans, high schools, and we try to create, whether it's events. So for instance, in the Mid-Atlantic in early April, we had a 2-day event, one in Baltimore and one in DC, where we had educators from the local county public schools come to Baltimore Country Club and Woodmont to learn about careers in golf,
Yeah.
specifically in turf. Right. So I kind of did all the behind the scenes work to coordinate that for the employers. And then thereafter, there was follow-up communication with those guidance counselors, students. I mean, I'm still getting resumes from students that are interested in summer work or apprenticeship programs. With New York, I kind of take a step back to your original question. It really was that developing that framework for the training, the on-the-job training, to take somebody from what I would call entry level, little to no experience, and over the course of 1 or 2 years, that they're getting some level of education, some level of streamlined training, so that by the end of 2 years, they're probably best suited for an AIT type role, a spray technician, irrigation technician type role.
Ready to start moving up the ladder.
Yeah, it's been, I'll be honest, it's been a little bit slow. So we submitted all of our documentation last December, or it was in December, and we're still kind of somewhere in the government's the Department of Labor's pecking order, and we're working through some of that now. So our anticipation is that program will be up and running, with the Department of Labor's stamp of approval, probably in September, right around September 1st. So
what does that mean to you? What does that mean? That their stamp of approval? What does that give you? What does that help you with?
Well, I think it legitimizes the program first off. Yeah, for the for the employer and for the employee.
Yeah.
The SUNY Delhi is our education partner, so they're providing 15 college credits towards that apprenticeship program. So there's value and, again, legitimacy to that. I think the big thing, and this is going to be a work in progress, is the fact that those employers will have access to $5,000 worth of tax credits, and that education that they're funding can be reimbursed to them 100%.
Oh, that's fantastic. Are they utilizing that? Are they taking advantage?
They will. I mean, I can tell you employers that I'm working with, Wanham Autonomy Golf and Country Club up in Rhode Island, just got $27,000 of reimbursement funding to offset wages and or education.
Wow, that's pretty significant.
It is significant, right? So, our friends down at Congressional, recently, I believe they were awarded about a $3,100 grant for education.
Oh, good.
Towards one of their employees. And
is that for Pete, I hope? Just kidding, Pete. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go there.
No, don't do it. That was a stupid joke.
I know. I think it's one of those things where hopefully it encourages employers to invest in their employees and see
I
that,
think so.
That there's benefit to doing that. Not everybody's going to be a rock star superintendent one day, but to get somebody to fill the needs that most of the businesses have right now, like I said, that spray technician, irrigation technician type role, I find is what most superintendents really need. Would they love to have somebody that's got the absolute, plant ID diagnosis, pathogen diagnosis? Of course. Yeah. Of course we want somebody that can manage 20 to 30 people. Of course we do.
Yeah. But we also need somebody that knows how to run a spray rig and do it, and can do it without messing things up or killing grass. So, I mean, to me, that's always been one of the most important jobs on the crew, because it's such a sensitive job. But finding somebody that's capable of doing that level of work, and usually those guys tend to grow into bigger and better jobs fairly quickly, but that's such an important role, and it's so hard to find that guy that has the attention to detail, that can read, write, know a little bit about how to fill up a tank and get it all done without the superintendent having to wonder if it's going to be a disaster or not. So it's critical.
Yeah. And I think, I don't want to say this. I feel like one of the things that's been an observation over 6 to 8 months of doing these assistant level searches, you kind of realize like, hey, first off, the expectation from the superintendent of what an assistant is to them is much different club to club. It's not the same. You can't take the cookie cutter job description from one club and say, hey, that's what we need here. Every search has its own unique identity.
Yeah.
And it's really based on the leader at the top to say, what is it that's going to define success to you? And I really do come back to, for most people, they're looking for passion, somebody who, for lack of a better terms, gives a shit.
Right. Yeah.
I've heard
That's
that.
probably number one, right? You
Yeah,
gotta show up on time and care.
that's the unpolitical, the ugly
I hear
version of
you.
it.
That's all good.
But I hear that often from superintendents.
Yeah.
But their roles within the operations are so diverse, club to club. So, I come back to, again, I think for most people right now, they just need somebody who can take some weight off the plate. They can jump on a sprayer, they can ham water, they can communicate appropriately. So I think this registered apprenticeship program really is going to help a lot of clubs, that they can now offer this to an existing staff member who may not have that education, but now there's a pathway for them to advance, versus previously it was like, well, you need to go to Penn State or you need to go to Rutgers. That might not be the case with the way that these programs are outlined.
Yeah, it's that part of it has all changed as well. What are some of the success stories that you've had over the last year? I mean, we started talking about that before we went on air, but give me some, give me some examples of some of the, one thing I will say is that you've done a great job of getting, some of your social media stuff out. I remember vividly seeing the work you did at Woodmont with Ryan and his crew. And that was really fascinating to me. I mean, you had a lot of stuff going on, and then I guess at Baltimore Country Club as well. But give me some of the success stories.
Well, if it's okay, selfishly, I'm going to start off with my own business.
I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, yeah. Selfishly, so we have 3 people on staff now with me.
And a year ago, you didn't have anybody, did you?
I don't have anybody.
Yeah. So you're growing. That's growing pain. That's a good thing, my friend. Keep it going.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were some, certainly, all 3 of them have no previous industry experience. So for the first 2 to 3 months, it was it was not a struggle, but really had to teach them the basics of, hey, here are the things that employers are looking for. And actually the biggest lesson I learned to stay in my lane, because
so when you say didn't have an experience, are you talking about golf course experience or recruiting experience?
Kind of both.
So you didn't get guys out of the ranks of our industry?
No, I really purposely wanted people with different experiences.
Oh, good.
Because I felt when they're screening people, I want them to evaluate the personality, their attitudes, their communication skills. I'll take care of the technical stuff.
Okay.
But if they can get through that, and those candidates,
like you said, you want to find somebody that gives a shit. And if you can't find that, then the technical stuff doesn't matter.
Right. So, again, it was very methodical. One of my team members, Mitch Rupert, was a sports reporter for 20 plus years. I mean, he won AP awards. So his communication skills and his note taking and interviewing skills were, certainly valuable. And that's come to fruition. One of the other gentlemen, Ryan McNally, Ryan was a sales director for JG Wentworth in medical sales. And
really?
I think it was in his last 5 years. I remember reading this. I have to look at his resume again, but he generated something like $24 million in his company. So he's a very intellectual person.
Yeah.
And they all
success. Yeah.
Absolutely. They all love golf, right? So that's the centerpiece to it. I mean,
isn't that why we're all in the business at some point in time?
Yeah, I didn't want people in here that didn't have a pure passion for the game in some shape or form.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think it'd be hard to work in this if you don't. Like, if you're waking up every day and all you're doing is sourcing people and recruiting people for an industry you don't care about.
Yeah.
And then our third person who we brought on, she's part-time. Her name is Mary Maloney. Her husband actually is a regional rep for GCSA, I believe, in the Midwest, Shane Conroy. So she's been awesome. I mean, she's been helping out facilitate a lot of back end administration aspects, scheduling, keeping the boys in order.
Yeah, well, that's always important to have somebody like that in the organization. So
Yeah.
what's your day to day? I mean, what are you doing? I mean, I know you're traveling a lot. You were telling me you're heading out to Pittsburgh and Ohio in a couple of hours. What's typical weekday look like in your world?
Well, usually I've got to get the girls up and ready for whether it's daycare, going to my parents by 8 o'clock. I'm usually out the door with them. Um, a lot of phone screens during the
Yeah.
week for myself, and that can fluctuate from morning, afternoon. A lot of times it's talking with clients, just kind of giving them updates. We've also, I think you said success stories. We've really refined our process. Like I've refined myself of how to manage this to kind of lead the ship and lead the direction of it, not enable bad habits or bad hiring practices, kind of try to
Right.
keep this very structured. So that's been also a big success. Um, Again, from a travel perspective, I like the winter season was all conference and education, right? So a lot of speaking
You
engagements
were
from,
doing, yeah, I was going to say you did a lot of speaking. So when you
and
do
that,
speaking, you're basically talking in general terms, state of the industry, labor, those kind of things.
yeah, I think so. I think that's, for the most part, it's here's my observations from these search processes. Here are some things that I've seen clubs do, successfully, from their benefits, pay. And then we really talk about leadership, because to me, that's the differentiator club to club is, the leadership. Are you adapting to the workforce? Or are you going to stay with the old methods? And for some people, old school is fine. If it's worked for them for 20 years, then they're going to stick with what they know. But for the majority, I
But
find
that doesn't work, does it? I mean, this is a whole different world that we live in. I mean, I don't know that you could stay with the old model of, bring them in and spit them out kind of a thing.
yeah, I think there's more of an adaptation to, work-life balance. Clubs that maybe were very against, well, not against, I hate saying that's not to sound derogatory, but, you know, the job is what the job is. And for some people, they couldn't get away from that, and they
Yeah.
weren't able to, I guess you could say, lower their expectations. And I don't think people are lowering their expectations. They're just adjusting to, this is what we have to do to survive.
Yeah, it's funny because, everybody, certainly any business owner has gone through this. And I spent some time talking to one of my business partners, and we were talking about how it used to be employees would come and say, can I get more hours? Can I get more hours? And
Yeah.
now the problem that we're fighting is, they come into, instead of saying, can I have more, overtime and make more money? Can I have Friday off? Can I have next Monday off? Can I have Thursday off? And it's now harder and harder to keep a qualified staff, especially at peak season when you really need to be pumping things through. So, and I've been caught a couple of times with some of the folks that I'm working with and I've worked with for a long time, saying, look, we've got to make changes. I mean, we just can't continue down the road that we used to be. I mean, I'm well, I don't want to say in the latter years of my career, but I've been around for a while, and I'm not the driving force anymore. And I think we have to realize that. And a lot of people in leadership of a certain age, they think that this is, how it was, is 30 years ago, and it's not. You have to manage to the group that you have now, and you have to work around their needs, their expectations. And this work-life balance is real. I mean, you got a couple little kids. I mean, things have changed.
Yeah, for sure. I think I don't know if empathy is the right word, but just being
I
more
like that
relatable,
word.
maybe being more relatable to that.
Yeah.
People have other things outside of life that dictate them. And if they don't have home life, in good balance, then they're definitely not going to be balanced when they come to work. So, again, like
That's a
you were
good
asking,
point.
like what things do we talk about? It's kind of reinforcing that. I think a lot of superintendents know that they need to do that. It's just they need that coaching, they need that reinforcement.
Yeah.
And I think what's been nice to see from a year ago to today, at least my observation and interactions with general managers and club officials, is that they're recognizing that needs to change. Like they can't keep expecting their department heads to be working 70, 80-hour weeks, or they're not going to have a staff themselves. And then they're forced to work that. So I think that work-life balance conversation continues to evolve. And that means different things to everybody.
So when you're working with somebody and you're having that conversation with a manager or some leader in an organization, and they just don't see that, is there a way to help them discover that, it has changed a little bit, and the workforce has changed? I mean, how do you have that conversation with somebody?
Well, I think one of the things that we've done is put data and metrics behind it. So
Well, that's good.
we survey a lot of clubs or superintendents and ask that pointed question, like, what's an average work week look like for your assistants? Obviously through our interviews with candidates, we're asking them, talk to us about a typical day. What's a work week? What is a week of work look like for you?
Yeah.
What do you want in an employer? Like, what kind of work schedule do you want? Right. So we've kind of got that anecdotal.
So you're going to throw facts and figures in my face when all I want is I want somebody now. I mean, that makes, it makes sense.
I think it's important that they have that, because they may, if they're coming to us, I'm guessing they're coming to us because they've had a job posted for 2 to 3 months and they're not filling a position.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to give them not only compensation data, but we need to give them a reality check of what this workforce is looking for, and be realistic with the kind of candidates we're going to bring them. And I like to think we bring a pretty diverse pool. We're going to bring people that have education in this industry, and we're going to bring people who don't.
You brought up compensation. I mean, that's one, obviously a big, flag, and it's changed. I mean, we're having to pay higher salaries, but that's not the whole game, is it? I mean, explain, I mean, even if you come in and say, okay, we'll give you $15 or $20 an hour. I mean, that's a small piece of a big puzzle. And I can't tell you how many guys I talk to say, we're paying them $20 an hour and I just can't keep them, and it goes back to the whole conversation of that's not, that's a small piece of the big pie here. And, this whole conversation of how to lead people and how to, help them, have a life. I mean, this is really the bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting in that I find that most people aren't leaving jobs because of the extra pay. They're leaving because of poor leadership. And I say that lightly, but leadership or disengagement might be a better word. There's some level of disengagement in the organization they're working for. Sometimes it's just purely, hey, my wife found another job, and we need to relocate. There's some of that certainly going on, but I think the search process with us, I think, is oftentimes a very good self-reflection period for superintendents in the clubs. I'm certainly not the most polished political presence. I'd probably say things pretty ugly, but I like to be honest with people.
You're direct. You're direct. That's good.
Maybe sometimes a little too aggressive.
Yeah.
I'm self-aware of that. But I think it's good to give that insight, because they need to hear that difference of opinion versus like I was saying earlier, like enabling bad practices that doesn't get them anywhere than they already are. So I think from a salary perspective, and we talked about this before we jumped on, it's so regionalized, but right now I really think that the majority of the country, for an assistant with 1 to 3 years, 2-3 years of experience with an education, that's the preferred requirement. I really struggle to see taking anybody less than 60, 65,000. I really do. And I think there's probably a lot of people that would look at me like, well, that's a real bold statement to make, but based on our search, I mean, we conducted a search where an assistant's job was paying up to $100,000.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about that too. I mean, 10 years ago, they were making $30,000 and working 8,500 hours a week. I mean, that doesn't make sense, to be honest with you.
I don't know if it's sustainable. I've had a lot of comments from superintendents that say, man, that $90,000, $85,000 salary is probably not sustainable, but hey, listen, when a club needs to get somebody in there that's qualified, they're going to do what they've got to do.
Yeah. I mean, that, having the, the qualified person is the key thing. Let me ask you this. When you're interviewing a client, how do you start the interview, and what are you really trying to discover when you're, if you're interviewing me as a potential client for any job, what's the process, and how do you really get to understand, is this guy, does he care? Is he going to be there on time? Is he, you can't really get that by asking a question. Are you going to be there on time? Oh yeah, sure, I'll be there on time. But I've interviewed people for a long time in my career, and those are some of the hardest things to really figure out, is get into the soul of this person. How do you do that?
Well, first off, we use predictive index, which we've talked about before. So we use
Yeah.
assessment tools and personality assessments, and it's a data point. It's not everything, but it's a good insight that you can pick away a couple things, about that person, what their drives, motivations are. Certainly, we do our due diligence with talking with their former employers. Usually, I'd like to say we're one or two degrees of separation away from knowing somebody.
Yeah, right.
And that's through
It's
industry
a small
networking.
industry, right?
Right. So,
But
I
a
think
lot of your people that you're interviewing aren't in the industry at all. So there's none of that networking that you can use, because a lot of people that you're finding are coming out of places other than the golf industry.
this
Right.
might sound like overstructured, but we put together a nice template. There's checkpoints of
Yeah.
the characteristics that I think make somebody successful being an assistant.
Yeah.
And that's been, fine-tuned and will continue to be fine-tuned based off the client feedback and just our relationships with assistants. I mean, our assistant career training program is built to help assistants in career development, but we learn a lot of things from them too.
Right. Right.
So, we have a nice check sheet that we're able to, everybody's in alignment with on my team of what we're looking for. And a lot of times you hear that in the questions, it's follow-up questions. You listen to their answers and then try to pick one or two things that they say and say, can you explain more?
Yeah.
Give me specifics.
And that's
Give me
experience
specific-
after doing this for a while. So have you changed some of the ways you go about doing this in the past year, now that you've got further down this road? Are you seeing things that you've made changes internally, personally, with to better recruit somebody or evaluate
It's
someone?
almost, yeah, it's almost comical, looking back like
Yeah.
a year ago, say, man, like,
Good.
I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but we're
Yeah.
much more refined in our process. We're consistent with our process. We don't break protocol. We have a 5-step process from beginning to end that we work with the clients, and we tell them up front, like, it's got to follow this, because if you don't, it's my name on that candidate.
Yeah, exactly. I understand
And
that.
if I have to go back and replace that person because we missed a step or somebody
Yeah.
stepped out of line, then that's not fair to me. It's not fair to the candidate. It's not fair to the business. So,
Yeah.
I think, again, by having 3 people working with me, it's given me space to, I think, work on the business versus like just being into every phone screen, every client communication, every little bit and that. So technology, we've leveraged technology,
Yeah.
some automation in our communications. And again, I've spent time training my people. Like I said, for those first 3 to 4 months, they were thrown right into the fire as we were trying to kind of figure this all out. And still, realistically, I was a year and a half into my business. I was still trying to figure out what is the primary business model and how do we best serve this industry in a capacity that's like digestible and
Yeah.
not being everything for everybody.
You said something just now that is intuitive, that you're working, more in the business than at the business, but that takes a long time. I mean, it took, I've been working a business for 35 years, and it probably wasn't until the last 5 that I haven't been, I've been able to step back and really, do what you're talking about. So I give you great accolades for being able to get there this far. Let me ask you about the personality, the screening process, that personality program that you use. I've used one. I think we talked about this last year, but I use DISC in hiring people here, but it's a personality profile, and they're not set in stone, but have you changed your thinking on those at all? Are they working better? Are you more selective? I mean, and you're using a very specific profiling system, right?
Yeah, correct. Here's what I would say is that it's a data point through a
Right.
process, right? If we have candidates, like, here's where I really see it. It removes to some degree unconscious bias from the employer, because
Good.
you could have a candidate, and I hate to use this word, but might be discriminated against because of age, might look at their resume and say, man, this person's really jumped around the last 3 years. Well, I think right now, given COVID, you do have to consider that as a function of the last 3 years, people's lives have been changed.
Yes.
So I think it helps with unconscious bias. And I think we do too, by giving objectivity. So when you look at a candidate and you say, man, would this person be fit for this job? I'm not quite sure. You can look at those reports and say, you know what, we're going to have to coach them. We're going to have to teach them, but we know that this person, has the abilities, the aptitude, the personality to do the job. They're wired to want to be an assistant, to be specialized in these kind of jobs that are really very process and precision focused, very results driven. So, I'd be remiss to say I'm probably on the somewhere between like an innovator and results oriented. So process and precision for me.
You're an entrepreneur now, so you have a different perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I think those personality assessments are another checkpoint through a process versus just, I'm going to read a resume.
Yeah.
And I'm going to check references and that's it. You need to do a little bit more, and it's not always perfect. Again, once they get on site, a lot of what I do is in the hands now of the superintendent, the leader in charge. So,
right.
I think what we've done differently now is, hey, we're going to have a 30-day follow-up. We're going to have a 90-day follow-up just to make sure, hey, is this still working for you?
What are some
out?
Yeah.
We can help? Like, can we help coach either the superintendent or the, the candidate? And I think that comes with experience. Like, I wasn't somebody a year ago that was comfortable telling a superintendent, well, here's some things that I think maybe could help you. And I think, again, that just comes with maturity of
it's all in the delivery, my friend. It's all in the delivery. How you present that, the personality traits. I mean, we use them even in the sales role, because oftentimes what you can find in interviewing somebody is, are they attention oriented? Are they really attention oriented, detail oriented, or are they one of these people that are, what normally we would call type A? I'm one of those. I would probably consider you one of those, where, we don't waste my time with facts and figures. Just tell me how to get it done, as opposed to the guy that says, I need to see all the data, the facts and the figures. And those are two radically different personalities. And I would assume being able to fit those types of personalities into the roles that you're trying to fit them into is a bit of a challenge, because in our industry, we need those guys with the attention to detail, and we need those guys that have the intuitiveness to be able to go out onto the golf course and say, hey, we got a problem on fairway 7. We got to go take a look at, I mean, and I assume that's trying to work that in with the leadership of the people you're working with.
Yeah, it's interesting that I find that you said about like discovery process. It's actually as well discovering the personality of the superintendent.
Well, no doubt. And matching the two of them.
Yeah, because I can be you can get a sense through a couple conversations, through kind of background checks on the club and that person's history. How many people have you mentored? What would your former employees say about you? Those things. It's not interrogative to say, hey, I'm judging you. It's no, I want to make sure that we get the right person for you. I want to
understand you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's what we have to do over and over.
Yeah. So that's got to be a bit of a challenge, is matching that personality to the employee personality to a candidate's personality. Because if you're going to bring, a kid that wants to have attention, I need to know every little detail of everything I'm doing, and a guy that just wants to basically say, go get it done and leave me alone, that's got to be a challenge for you.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like what's also changed is that now I think superintendents have to manage to the personalities more so than ever, versus before it was get in line or get off the bus.
Right. Like, exactly. Those days are over, I think, my friend. Yeah.
For the most part. I think superintendents now are really having to accommodate to the personalities, which is, it's a skill set. Like most of these guys weren't trained in that. I'm still learning it. So it's not like I'm sitting here being the perfectionist on this, but that is what has also changed, I think, in this whole realm, is how we deal with people. And it's just not run with an iron fist anymore. It's really making sure people are engaged and they want to do a good job. They want to represent the company well. they want to progress, they want to do those things. Discretionary effort
Yeah.
is now a key thing that superintendents have to get the most out of their people.
It's funny because I have a 22-year-old son, and he's in the workforce, and came home last night, and you could just see immediately walking, and he's upset, and we're like, okay, what's going on? Well, my boss yelled at me for this and that, and and she's horrible, and blah blah blah. So he calmed down, and I finally said, is there any chance that maybe she was right, or she was trying to help you? And he just kind of stopped, and he was just all emotion. And managing somebody, and that's not untypical of this age group of these 20-year-olds. And I don't mean to sound so generic, but I know my son fairly well, and but I see that often with him and kids his age, some of his friends. But being able to manage people to their level of expectation and to their needs is an art. I mean, that's not, like you said, 10 years ago, nobody cared. There was 200 resumes for every job. Now there's none, so it's got to be a big part of what you're doing, is helping people understand. And, our industry, we've never gotten training, but there is no training for a golf course superintendent on how to manage an employee. You don't get that in the universities. You rarely get that in associations. It's not, it's hard to get out of a book, and most of us don't read books on that level. So, I mean, how do you help guys discover this? I mean, they have to be learning it on their own, obviously, but I would think this is a big part of what you guys are doing. And I think it's one of your big successes, quite honestly.
I really appreciate that. Again, I try not to over commit my opinions or
Good.
or it's just not right. Like, we're there to do a job, but I think we build a relationship with those people throughout a process. Like, I feel like I'm a part of their team. Rob Alonzi, longtime superintendent at Fenway. And I'm going to share this story because this is like kind of to this point. When Rob engaged me, I did a little bit of background research on him, and I'm comfortable saying this on air because I have a tremendous respect for him. I have a tremendous respect for his family name and all that.
Yeah.
And when we had our first conversation, I walked away from it thinking, man, I'm not sure I can help Rob. Like, he's a very tenured superintendent.
Yeah.
Rob
Doing
is
it a long time. Yeah.
very successful at a high demand top 100 level facility. And I'm like, can I really help Rob? Am I going to be the kind of person that he benefit from? And I mean, I learned as much working with Rob as vice versa. And it was refreshing for me to see, like, that generation of superintendent is now accommodating. And I think, again, I'm sort of that bridge between this younger generation and I hate to use the word older generation and put Rob.
I hate that word too, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Rob. I'm sure if you listen to this, but it was a really cool thing because I think that rapport that's built in that search process, and what at least I love about this, is you're building relationships with people.
Yeah.
You're trying to represent them as best you can to the candidates, and vice versa, represent those candidates. So you're getting an authentic process. You're getting authentic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how to best term that, but I think that there's a value in that in of itself, if that's what the superintendent wants. And I think most people that are now coming to me, they've probably done their research on me and they've talked to their friends, and they're getting that perspective. So the screening process with the employers to make sure it's a good relationship with us is critical too.
Talk to me about the generation differences. I mean, guys, the older generations versus, the guys that are in their 40s and 50s versus the young superintendents. I mean, it must be, is there any consistency among those? I mean, I don't want to generalize, obviously, because everybody's different, and we need to allow that to happen. But are you seeing any consistencies among the generations of superintendents when it comes to managing employees?
Yeah. And again, there's no right or wrong here. Everybody's got their
I
own.
understand that. I'm trying to make that point. Yeah.
Preface that. But what I see right now is that age bracket of 35 to 40, maybe into 45, they kind of came through up the ranks the same time I did. Right. Yeah. So you're used to understanding what those 100-hour work weeks would look like, where you're canceling plans on a Friday night because you got an irrigation break. There's no summer vacations. And I think that generation has also built families that are not maybe accommodating, like don't want to accommodate to that. Like that's not going to be good enough for the wives. And those superintendents want to be able to have a life outside of work.
Yeah, and both
Right.
husband and wife are working, and so it's a shared, responsibility at home, and that whole lifestyle has changed, and people
So
want to be home with their kids.
right. So that demographic of superintendent is probably more accommodating to this workforce that wants that little bit more work-life balance. Um, I do see that. It's a little bit easier conversation,
Yeah,
that demographic for me versus, let's say, 45 to 60, um, where this is how we've always done it, and
right.
you're not changing the tiger stripes
Yeah.
when I've got 5 to 10 years left of the, being a superintendent. So,
But if
but
that generation doesn't change, do they still have 5 or 10 years left?
I can't answer that.
I'm
I would
sorry, it was a
say,
loaded question. I mean,
yeah,
I say that earnestly only because, we've got to, I mean, it's interesting, you talk about your generation and how they've accommodated, but let me ask you this very directly. How do you accommodate? I mean, accommodation means, take Fridays off, but you've got an irrigation leak. I mean, how, especially in this day and age when you're 40% down in labor, how can we balance that 40% down and I've got an irrigation leak, or I've got a tournament on Wednesday through Friday or through Saturday? I mean, how do you make that? What's the changes that are happening that is accommodating these kind of global changes?
well, it seems the communication, like being very transparent upfront about the job expectations. And then I don't want to say structurizing, it's your water week. It's your week to
Yeah.
be here longer, and holding each other accountable to that standard so people don't feel like they're taken advantage of, I think is probably part of that as
Yeah.
well. Um, Man, it's hard to say you got to change golfers' expectations because I'm not sure that's really going to happen, like in the grand scheme of things. But it's like anything else. If you make yourself more accessible and that's the standard you set, you just created your own problem.
Yeah. Now, golfers have changed too, because we've got a whole new crew of golfers. Are there the new golfers, what we'll call the COVID golfers, the guys that have come into into golfing since COVID started? Are their expectations different than what they were 10, 15 years ago?
Based off the courses that I've played recently and the condition of the conditions
Uh-oh.
of it, I think it's gone up. I'm certainly not as in on the front lines with those conversations, but based on the conditions I've seen at clubs that certainly don't have all the resources in the world, I think we're overperforming, which is that's probably the history of the superintendent, over delivering.
Yeah. Well, and that's just, I mean, that's the glory of this industry, is that, I mean, that's truly what makes this such a special industry, is these guys, they just have such high demands of themselves. It's just amazing. What kind of changes are you seeing agronomically in the golf course, in terms of, we're not doing this anymore. Maybe we're not raking bunkers. Maybe we're not, doing something that we used to do on a regular basis because we just don't have the people. What are some of the first things that you're seeing in terms of conditioning and agronomics that might be going by the wayside and changing?
I mean, I'd love to say that I think bunker maintenance is slightly changing, where they're not raking 7 days a week. They're alternating, and instead of it being a 4-hour job, maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's just touch them up. Weekends, it's just touch them up.
Yeah. How can it not be when you're 40% down in staff, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking changing cups is maybe not, again, a
really?
6 day a week job. There might be a day in between here and there that we can change, we could skip a day.
Yeah.
See,
that would be great for my golf game, because I can't tell you how many times I've hit a ball onto a green and it lands on yesterday's cup, and I get all upset that, well, I would have had that hold out. But
I do think again, maybe it's the fertility management, growth potential, growth, and how people are managing that, whether it's through PGR usage, maybe using more products like Earthworks, building the soil so they're not
slowing everything down a little bit and cutting back some of the stuff. I mean, one of the things that we talk a lot about from agronomic standpoint is that you don't need to do as much just let the soil do its work. And and water management, same thing. I mean, building a better soil gives you better water management. But I was really kind of referring to some of the mechanics. I mean, we're seeing more and more talk on on robotic mowers.
Yeah,
I don't know.
triplex mowers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think those I heard a story of a club literally last night from a very, very prominent course. And I won't name where, but
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, they've transitioned to triplex, and I almost fell off my chair. Like, I
Really?
cannot believe that that's happening. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they're still getting conditions, green speeds the way they need to be. They're still
Yeah.
meeting that expectation, just doing it slightly differently. And there's no badge of honor that somebody should feel, oh my God, I'm triplexing greens. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm the worst superintendent in the world. No, it's being smart. It's being
Well, the
efficient.
equipment is better too. I mean, there's a lot of changes in that, and I think they're going to only get that better. Is there a big difference between the the high-end private courses and some of the public courses? I mean, obviously there's a big difference, but I'm getting at how they're managing expectations and some of the the workflow that's going through those properties. Are they having? Is it easier to get people into the high-end privates versus the publics? I mean, what do you see between when you work with those two different groups, which are obviously, and you've worked on both ends of those? I mean, what kind of things are you seeing that distinguishes those two groups from a labor maintenance kind of standpoint?
Yeah, this is man, this is a really interesting. I really want to do a case study on this, but what I see is that the public courses are much more open-minded to somebody with transferable skills, maybe minimal to no experience, and getting them into the industry, and versus maybe the higher end privates where they kind of want the finished fit and finished product of an employee, that somebody that's got understanding of day-to-day operations. They can change cups, they can use all the equipment.
Yeah.
Most of the higher end level clubs want that type of employee, but that volume of candidates just isn't necessarily there, or those candidates just, they don't know where to access those jobs. They're not aware of it.
Yeah.
Right. So I find that, and this is critical for this industry, that those lower end facilities are the backbone of making this industry tick down the road and solving this assistant problem, because we need more people coming into the industry, even at that entry level. And I think more lower level clubs, and I hate to say lower level,
No, I know, I don't like that term either, but we all know what we're talking about.
Lower budget courses
Yeah.
are going to be the savior to this, because they're going to take a chance on somebody. And that's something that's been pretty eye-opening to me, is how many people actually do want to come into this industry. There are most in every one of our searches, we will get candidates and we do like a pre-questionnaire. Why are you interested in this job? And the answer is, I love golf. I've played golf for X amount of years, and I want an entrance point into this industry. And that's
I don't want a job sitting at a desk, and I want to work outside.
We interviewed a lawyer. Okay. Very successful lawyer, 10 years in the business, and wants to get out of it and wants to get into golf. He's a scratch player, watches the maintenance crew, flat out told me he watches the maintenance crew every week, and has always been fascinated by the work they do, and he wants to jump into it. But I mean, that's a major lifestyle change going.
I've had a dozen lawyers in my career, and I can honestly say there's not one that hasn't come to me and says, how do I get into that? I want to go just cut fairways and do all that. I hate what I'm doing. I want to be out there on the golf course, maybe play around a golf or two. And that's just, I think that's common in that world. Let me ask you this. Are you seeing changes in the, in assistants? I mean, are we seeing assistants now that are looking to be lifelong assistants? Is that changed? I mean, it used to be, you're an assistant for a couple of years, and we're going to kick you out the door, and you got to go find, you got to go fly, grasshopper. And it sounds to me, both superintendents and even assistants that I work with and talk to, the superintendents are saying, you know what, I don't want to push, first of all, it's too hard to find them. And secondly, this guy's really good. I'd like to have him here forever so I can, have dinner with my wife on Friday night and, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, are you seeing the change in that presentation to assistants?
Yeah, I think that, again, come back to this discussion of open-mindedness.
Yeah.
I think more superintendents are realizing that's much more sustainable, and it's going to make them stronger and make their business stronger.
Yeah.
I would like to think that style of candidate would be perfect. They're going to bring
I would
experience.
too.
They're going to be invested into the organization. It all obviously probably does come back to pay to some degree. If you're only offering 60,000 for a lifelong assistant, I think that would be tough, depending on that person's lifestyle and goals. Like, personally, I think it'd be tough to go, to keep somebody there for super long. So that's where I see that $80,000 to $90,000 salary is valuable to want to retain somebody.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, this is a philosophical difference between superintendents. There are many that believe by doing that, you're not motivating somebody. They're not going to be motivated to want to do a better job. And that's not necessarily the type of profile we want. That's
But isn't
okay.
that leadership more than it is, salary or position?
I think in their
Ultimately,
I think in their mind, it's like, we don't want somebody to be complacent here. And they look at it as that's complacency. Whereas that candidate looks at, no, I want to be tied to one organization, and I don't want to have to jump around.
longevity, yeah.
But
Think
again,
about it. 10 years ago, we were paying assistants $30,000, and the only way they could get ahead is to find that next job and the next job and become a super and get to that superintendent's level of income. And now, if you can make 60 to 100 or $120,000, and I know many assistants nowadays that are making, over $100,000, and and they tell me that, hey, I'd be happy to stay here the rest of my life. I'm very comfortable. And obviously, it goes back to leadership of that superintendent. And you and I have a number of mutual friends that have had assistants that have been on the course for 20 years, 30 years. And I was out playing golf with one of them the other day, and he's got a crew of guys that have been there for 30 years. I don't know many places like that, but he takes good care of them, and they work very hard, and they do a phenomenal job. The place is always spectacular, and I can see that being the future of golf course superintendent work.
I do. I think, again, it's all relative to where you're at in
Yeah.
the pecking order of this industry. There's some hard truths about this industry that, there's some clubs and that have a brand reputation of pushing guys on, and that's going to be that way. That's what's their MO, and that pathway will continue because those clubs have that sort of influence for those that want to become superintendents. But not every assistant has that long-term goal of being a superintendent. I've had many candidates tell me, hey, I like to compliment the superintendent. I don't want to deal with
the politics. I don't want all that headache.
I just love the job.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the day-to-day grind. Or I love fixing irrigation. I love doing those things.
Yeah.
So,
and there's nothing wrong with that, which is the kind of neat thing. Hey,
if it's okay, I wanted to give, you were talking about success stories, and I'd rather talk about the employers to support them, because I think those stories will share and resonate with some of your audience. If it's okay.
Sure.
Like, give one or two examples.
Your show.
So, yeah, my show. Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
It's always your show.
I do want to give, I come back to Overbrook probably too much. Brandon was like the perfect early client. Because he was already thinking a lot of this way.
Brandon Collins who I've known since he was 15 and is one of the best in the business. But I know some of these stories, but go ahead.
Yeah, Brandon's at Overbrook Golf Club in Villanova, and Brandon engaged with me, I guess it was 2 years ago almost, about this registered apprenticeship program. And he has, I believe, 4 individuals right now that are kind of in that program. One of them is on the equipment side, and then 3 of them are more in the turf, assistant track pathway. One of those individuals basically came in with previous experience and kind of motored through a lot of the basic tasks that they were offering. When Brandon, for a good reason, both his assistants, Sam Butler and Eric Junkins, moved on, he didn't have to worry about outsourcing and recruiting an assistant. He had somebody there internally.
Yeah.
So he promoted up. And then the other 2 individuals, one of them, which had no golf course experience, started there last March. A year later, this gentleman can spray, change cups, water. In his first year with no experience, but it had more to do with the mentorship that Brandon invested into those people. So that's a great success story of seeing sort of that philosophy of build within work
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
untraditional type candidates too.
And he was very open to that idea and embraced it. And you guys worked very closely. And you know, he and I have talked about this a number of times, and he's just found this to be a very successful approach.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll tell you one of the other interesting success stories for me is a gentleman by the name of Pat O'Brien out at Hyde Park in Cincinnati. So Pat engaged with me, I guess it was back last fall, to just kind of having discussion. That's how most of these start out. It's a discussion. It's not, hey, this first time we're going to have a sale and we're going to be working together. It's oftentimes a couple conversations till we figure out what is exactly you need for me to help you with. And Pat was looking for an assistant. I guess this was probably around like February of this time and this year. And he said, I don't know if I need you for the full gambit of search and placement, but I think where you would help is with getting this position out and helping us network with maybe a different audience of people. And he ended up hiring 2 assistants through our process, and one of those which came from landscaping. And this gentleman came to me and said, you know, I've always loved golf. I've kind of hit the pinnacle in my mind of the landscape career, and I feel like the next step is the golf industry. That candidate wouldn't typically be evaluated for an assistant type role. And again, I come back to sort of unconscious bias a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, having worked with Pat, I knew that Pat was the kind of person that would embrace that profile of candidate and experience and not hold it against him like, oh, he's never worked on a golf course before. He can't be successful. You know, he took that.
Yeah, I think I've met him, and I think he's done extremely well, actually.
So you know, those are 2 things that really like epitomize where I find the more employers are open-minded to different backgrounds and different experiences, the better position they'll be to have success in a search process.
Right.
Because they're not going to disqualify people just because they don't have specific golf course experience.
Well, we have run out of time, and I know you've got places to go, but I'm going to ask you a stupid question, but what's the crystal ball look like for the next year in labor? And, you know, what kind of changes do you think we'll see? I mean, is it going to get easier, better, different? I mean, what's your crystal ball tell you?
Well, I think as a generalization, I don't see a major change happening this year. I think that a lot of clubs, you know, there's 200 some job postings, I think right now on TurfNet.
Yeah.
I think that's going to continue as people are still reevaluating what is my career trajectory and where do I want my life to be. I don't think that's going to change. I don't think it's going to change in 5 years, but I will
5 years.
I think at least because the university enrollment numbers aren't going to drastically improve. They're going to steadily come up, right? For the ones that are working at it, from their perspective, from the university level. So I think we're in a 5-year period, maybe longer. My evaluation though is very optimistic in the sense that we've placed every search that we've been in for assistants within 60 to 90 days. Does that mean that we have 10 to 20 candidates? Absolutely not.
Yeah. Means you're
But
working
I think we're finding consistently 3 to 5 people that fit the requirements of what employers are looking for. And I think employers are adjusting. They understand that, you know, getting dozens of applicants isn't going to happen. They're going to have to train people. They're going to have to train people and take risks, give people opportunities, and maybe look internally as well for candidates that maybe they're not like the prototypical type assistant, but can I give them a little bit more opportunity and training, and can they keep kind of elevating? So I see a lot of that. And I think there's a lot of people that want to come into the industry. Can we accept them and get them, you know, assimilated into our environment quick enough and be open-minded to that style of candidate. So I'm optimistic. I kind of have moved myself away from a lot of the entry-level type search because that is a totally different challenge. It's a different style of candidate, a different conversation at clubs, you know, to attract the entry level. But as a whole, optimistic. We've had great discussions with many candidates for assistant positions. So not doom and gloom, but I think, they're gonna have to work at it.
It's
Clubs
a
are gonna
little
have to
work. Exactly. Put some time into it. It's not the 200 resumes going. Well, my friend, I gotta, I gotta say, I can't thank you enough for being here, and we'll revisit this next spring, and maybe it'll be a different story. Maybe it'll be a better one. Maybe it won't be. But I think we'll be, like you said, I have to agree with you. I think this is a 5-year run on employees, and I don't know that any of us, certainly my age, understand that, but that's the reality of what it is. And I think you've done a great job of helping superintendents discover what this is all about, and helping them maybe think things a little differently, and manage things a little bit differently. And that's certainly a necessity in this marketplace. So I commend you on everything you're doing. I know you're a busy man, and like I've said a couple times, we still got to get together for lunch and say hi. But I really appreciate your time and your insight, and I wish you the very best of luck. And I'm sure you'll keep running. Maybe next year you'll have 3 more employees when we get together.
I enjoy the intimacy of our group right now. I certainly don't want to grow
Good.
too big.
Yeah.
And then my last comment is, I really want to thank you and people like you who have supported me and the superintendent community. Like, if it wasn't for that community, I wouldn't be where I'm at.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now. So it's been a very humble and fun ride.
Yeah. Well, I think we all agree that this, I mean, we're all in this because this community is so special. I mean, these people are real. They work their tails off, and they do it for little accolade. And they just love to be able to see the finished product and be able to step back and say, look what we've gotten done. And that, you don't see that in any other industry like we see it in the golf industry. So it's been my life and my career, and it's obviously been yours. So hopefully we have some more good stories to tell next spring when we get together and catch up on where the labor force is. So Tyler, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Joel.